here I am in the heart of London, and I've got quite a story to tell you. It all started early one morning in May 1885, when a young woman hurried along this street. Her name was Annie Swan. She was 17 years old, and she was scared stiff. She was desperate to see General William Booth of the Salvation Army. Within about 3 months, what she had to tell him would rock the nation and bring pandemonium to the streets of London. Annie's destination was that building over there, the Army's International Headquarters. Well, she didn't actually go into that building, but the original headquarters, which stood on that site before it was blitzed during the war. And she didn't actually meet the general, but she met the general's son, Bramwell Booth, who was just 29 years old and the Army's Chief of Staff. Now, he wasn't the barnstorming character that his father was. He was much quieter, and he had a hearing aid. But he was not lacking in courage, and he had a great genius for getting things done. Bramwell's resolute faith is well expressed in an old Army song. I can, and I will, and I do believe.
He writes the pardon on my heart. He writes the pardon on my heart. He writes the pardon on my heart. This moment I believe. I can and I will and I do believe. I can and I will and I do believe. I can and I will and I do believe that Jesus died for me. He writes the pardon on my heart. He writes the pardon on my heart. He writes the pardon on my heart. This moment I believe. I can and I will and I do believe. I can and I will and I do believe. I can and I will and I do believe that Jesus died for me. That Jesus died for me.
Annie Swan had come up to London from Sussex to work as a domestic servant in Pimlico. But when they gave her a red silk dress to wear instead of a cap and apron, she realized to her horror that she'd been lured into a brothel. Well, as it happens, she did have the Red Salvation Army songbook with her, which contained the general's address. So this is where she made for once she'd escaped from the house at about 4 o'clock in the morning after barricading herself in her room. She couldn't have talked to anyone better than Bramwell Booth, because he knew something of the scene already, as his wife, Florence Booth, had opened a refuge for street girls in Whitechapel about 4 years earlier. But until he talked to Annie, he hadn't realized just how bad and brutal the system was. As the Army looked into it further, they found that girls of 13 and even younger were being tricked into this vicious trade. There were cases of girls being drugged and shipped in coffins over to the vice dens in the continent via Antwerp and Brussels. But what was perhaps worst of all was the fact that some parents would willingly and knowingly sell their daughters into this debauchery. Something had to be done to bring this scandal to the notice of the public. Bramwell Booth came to the offices of the influential Pall Mall Gazette here off the Strand. Its editor was William Stead, and together they hatched an ingenious plan. Central to it was Rebecca Jarrett. She was a Salvationist living in Winchester. Before her conversion, she'd been in the business of buying girls. Well, with great reluctance, she agreed to use her old skills just one more time. Stead was to pose as a roue wanting to buy a young virgin. The girl would be given a medical, and everything would be done as if she was bound for a house of ill repute. But just before the brothel door, she would be spirited away to the safety of the Salvation Army in France. When they shared their plan in confidence with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Benson, he said, it would be highly dangerous. But he gave his approval. So too did the Bishop of London, Dr. Temple. And Cardinal Manning, head of Britain's Roman Catholics, also went along with the idea. So Rebecca Jarrett negotiated the sale of 13-year-old Eliza Armstrong. Her mother received 5 gold sovereigns.
Read all about it. Thank you, miss. The Eliza Armstrong case. Thank you.
When the Pall Mall Gazette appeared on the streets containing Stead's revelations that young girls could be and were being bought, there was uproar. Crowds besieged the offices of the Gazette for copies, so much so that traffic came to a halt in central London. In 17 days, the army collected nearly 400,000 signatures to a petition demanding government action, and they took it in a brass band parade here to the House of Commons. Within 5 weeks, a new Criminal Law Amendment Act had been passed, giving the police greater powers and raising the age of consent from 13 to 16 years old. The army and its Christian allies had won a significant victory. A good reason for the Regent Hall Band to play The Ambassadors. You might have thought that Bramwell Booth and William Stead would have been made national heroes, but they weren't. Not then. It was crazy, because here at Westminster, they'd both helped the Home Secretary to draft the new legislation. As a result of their action, the laws have been changed also in Australia and in the United States. But the authorities were not pleased.
These people have made Britain and the Empire look damn foolish in the eyes of the world.
So when Eliza Armstrong's father popped up and said he had no knowledge of the sale of his daughter, the authorities decided to
Let them have it.
Shame!
Damn you, Grenoble! Damn you!
Public opinion also decided that it had been conned. So the Army's Chief of Staff and his Confederates were beaten up on the way to the courts. So just 3 months after their triumph, Bramwell Booth, William Stead, Rebecca Jarrett and 2 others stood trial here at the Central Criminal Court at the Old Bailey. The Attorney General, Sir Richard Webster, alleged that they had, by force and fraud, taken Eliza Armstrong from her parents. William Stead conducted his own defence and called the Archbishop of Canterbury as a witness. The judge, Mr. Justice Lopez, refused on the grounds that the Archbishop's testimony is irrelevant to the matter in hand. At the end of the 13-day trial, Bramwell Booth was acquitted. But William Stead received 3 months hard labour and Rebecca Jarrett was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment. Had anyone known that Charles Armstrong wasn't really the father of Eliza, well, the case would have collapsed. Mercifully, it did no harm to the Army's reputation. But Bramwell Booth sustained injuries from the mob that increased his deafness for the rest of his life. As for his wife, Florence, well, she continued with her rescue work. The law might have been changed, but the girls and their customers were still there, as they are today. As far as Christians are concerned, they need you, they need me, they need Christ. Every 24 hours here in Amsterdam, over 20,000 men use the services of 3,000 girls. A remarkable lady and her helpers care for their souls. Some 40 years ago, Alida Bossart was given a few guilders, a Salvation Army flag, and told to go and do something in the narrow canal side streets which make up the city's red light area. Well, what she did captured the imagination of the Dutch people, and she is now one of the most popular women in Holland. Now in her 75th year, Colonel Alida Bossart is still here and very active. This is a world of pawn shops, sex movies and live shows. So how did you first approach the ladies on the street?
Now, in this district, I didn't know sure in that time. I think in that time were also about 3,000 ladies and girls, working in the prostitution. Mm-hmm. And they were all sitting before the windows, standing on the door, walking on the street. And I thought it was the best, and then I think on the founder of the Salvation Army, William Booth, I go out in the beginning with 40 war cries, the Salvation Army paper, and he brings a message when they read it, and otherwise you had anything to go in, and I came in every brothel, every public house, and I go from house to house and ask, will you have the war cry? And I must try to make a goodwillcentrum, and a goodwillcentrum is in fact a supermarket of services, spiritual and social, in all different situations. Not alone for alcohol problems, not alone for drugs problems, not alone for homeless problems, but for everybody and what the people ask to do that.
Alida spoke of a goodwill centre offering a supermarket of services. This is where people come. 24 hours a day help is at hand for anyone in Amsterdam in any kind of need. Oh, hello. This is the Goodwill Centre,
Yes, it is.
So if I turned up here penniless, lost, and nowhere to sleep, what would you do for me?
I think we want to know the reason why you are penniless. Because when you are a tourist who is coming to Amsterdam to have a cheap holiday or something like that, then we say we are not a cheap hotel, and we say find another place. But if you are robbed or there are other problems, then we try to help you.
So you really do know whether people are cheating or not, do you?
Not always. We wanted to know, but we don't always know it.
Alcohol or drugs afflict nearly half who come. Every day brings new clients, and some never go away. Now, this is the sitting room. Anyone can drop in here off the street to have a cup of coffee, chat with friends, or begin to solve a problem. A girl may be a prostitute not because she loves the game or the money. Street girls addicted to drugs and desperate for their next fix risk everything and take what they can get. Often, it's the innocent who suffer. Dear, is this yours? Is this yours? Thank you. Thank you. These babies are heroin addicts because that's what their mothers were. So here at the Trompendal Youth Centre in Hilversum, the Salvation Army staff helped to nurse them through the fretful agonies of drug withdrawal. Like Annie Swan, they didn't ask to be born into an underworld of drugs and sexual exploitation. But here they are. It's a world to which they may easily return once they leave the Army's care. Alida Bossart might rescue them later on, who knows? Let's hope she doesn't have to. Hey? I believe you have a very special Christmas carol service.
Of course, you have always Christmas meetings for homeless people, for young people, for old people, for family. You have it in the churches, in the Salvation Army, hall, you have Christmas meeting. But then I begin in 1948 a special Christmas meeting for prostitutes. And dan hadden we een little card and we give them about 1,000 cards out in the district. But we get about 150, 200 people, they came in. And then they sing all together the very nice songs from Christmas, Silent Night and Night, and they sing other Christmas songs, you know them all. And they had sometimes, there was in a corner a little problem about the price of the prostitution, and in the other corner they have another little problem. But then in otherwise they sing together and they get a movie about anything about Christmas. And they had coffee and chocolate and bread and nice sweet and so. And then we begin at the night. At 1:30, meestal in the night, we begin, and at about 4 o'clock, 4:30, it was on the end.
Do you aim to convert them?
We can bring the message, and we can hope that they go think about that. But I think you hope that they will be converted, but that is not work from people. That is work from God self, and that the Spirit works in the spirit of other people.
What do you think Jesus would say if he came to this district?
I think he comes to this district, and this time in the spirit, but when he real comes as so he was in the world, he hates the sin, but he loves the sinner.
When Alida Bossart began her work in Amsterdam, she had one very useful ally. The first edition of the War Cry appeared in 1879. It was produced on a rickety old press which had fits of printing 2 copies and ripping up 3. Technology has improved to produce editions in nearly 30 languages across the world. William Booth realized that there were people who wouldn't read the Bible, but who would read a halfpenny newspaper with a gospel message in a popular style. Delivering the war cry amongst pubs and bars was Alida Bossart's way of introducing herself to her people. For the Salvation Army soldiers and lasses, it represents a vital link with the general public. There's many a pub with a good story about the war cry. For instance, the chap who left his wife and family. He regretted it, but didn't have the nerve to go back. He was seeking solace in a pint of beer, picked up the war cry, and he couldn't believe it when he saw that his name was in there with a personal message. Come home, all is forgiven. Well, home he went, there and then. Left his pint in the pub. Now, that's a story from last century, but the Army's Missing Persons Bureau still uses the war cry to try and track down people who've disappeared.
Thank you very much.
There's a story of the war cry that happened just after the Annie Swan drama. Just outside Tokyo, there's the walled city of the Yoshiwara, and it contained over 5,000 girls, many of them sold into prostitution by parents who needed to pay off family debts. Well, in August 1900, to the beat of a drum and the waving of their banner, a procession of Salvationists entered the gates. And a special edition of the war cry informed the girls that if they wished to leave, Japanese law was on their side, and the army would take care of them. Well, that was the signal for thousands of girls to renounce their trade. The Salvationists were beaten up for their pains, but the Mikado supported them. A piece of music that might well be dedicated to the war cry is The Big Little Light, here played, appropriately enough, by the Amsterdam Staff Band. Well, Annie Swan certainly got more than she bargained for when she came up to London, and the same thing is happening to lots and lots of youngsters today. So the Salvation Army have formed what they call the Midnight Patrol. And with me tonight is Lieutenant Valerie Schultz. Valerie, how many stations do you take care of around the London area?
We go around the 3 stations in the area, which is Euston, St Pancras and King's Cross, and in that way we cover all the tube lines, the rail lines north of London.
And what kind of people do you help?
Anybody, anyone who has a need, perhaps helping them to get into a hostel or sending them onto a particular agency, whatever their particular need is, we try and fit that. We just look for anybody that might be at risk. Just a few months ago, we met 2 lads on the station and they'd missed their train home after a pop concert. And we took them back to the house because there was nowhere else for them to go for the night. And I suggested that they rang their parents, and the first boy rang his mother and she was fine. But the second mother was a little bit more caring. And she was talking to her son on the phone and he was trying to explain that he'd tried everything and they just couldn't get home. And in the end he said, but Mum will be all right because we've met 2 ladies on the station and they've said we can stay with them for the night. So I had to explain to her that we were nice girls, really.
The army says, doubt not, God is here. Their witness in this red light district is that God does not abandon those who he has made in his own image. He simply offers them a better way, and all who will can take it.